So for that, we have an expert. We have a lead ISO auditor, Alex Kvartirov, who is the president of MS Consulting, and we'll be learning about ISO, fundamentals of ISO from Alex. And there are different types of ISO regulations, ISO standards, I must say, and we learn about which one is the fundamental one, which ones are actually, there are similarities, there are differences, for example, so we learn about it, and it is critical for manufacturing as well as other industries, basically. And to have a quality and management system in place is very advantageous based on what we have been seeing and observing in the marketplace. But before further ado, I like to invite Alex to our virtual stage so that we can learn from him as for fundamentals of ISO and how to comply. And we'll also address how to comply digitally. Alex, are you ready to share your screen?
Yes, Kevin.
All right, great.
Right.
I stopped sharing,
There.
so all right. You can see your screen.
Okay.
Okay,
All
looks
right.
good. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Kevin, for inviting me to participate in this very, very informative symposium. Today, I'll talk about, and it's obviously a very brief introduction to ISO, several ISOs that I will try to cover. 9001, which is really the standard for all of the other ISOs. So everything is really based on ISO 9001, and then each other ISO is tailored to its specific purpose, which you will see how it's done. ISO 13485 is the medical device ISO. AS9100 is the aerospace standard. And the ISO 22000 is the food safety standard. So they're all very different as far as the market is concerned, but the structure is really identical. And the point of my presentation really is how to deal with any ISO, okay? And obviously, the most efficient way is to comply with all the ISOs digitally. And with a software tool, which Bimser provides, QDMS. I will demonstrate later on in my presentation how important it is to use a tool like QDMS to help you deal with all the data. Because dealing with quality data is a lot of work, and you need help in managing it. So ISO really involves quality, and certainly Ron in the previous presentation made an excellent introduction to quality, why it's so important. So I'm not going to repeat that because I think I couldn't do any better than he did. So let's get started here. A very brief introduction about my company, AMRUS Consulting. I personally, I'm a certified ISO 9001 lead auditor, and I'm the sole proprietor of AMRUS Consulting. I've established my company back in 2015 after a rather lengthy career as a project manager in a large aerospace company, which is certified to the AS91 quality standard, which is the aerospace standard. So currently what I do is I provide consulting services for various businesses to achieve and also maintain ISO certification. And back in 2018, I became a Bimser solutions partner. So what it means is that I'm trying to use the Bimser tool, which is certainly QDMS, and try to apply it to or help to integrate it into various organizations so that it would simplify and make it life a lot easier for them in dealing with all of the ISO related data. And I've been presenting a number of webinars and lectures on various ISO topics. So the first thing is I want to address is what are the ISO quality management management principles. And again, as I mentioned before, ISO strictly deals with quality management. So there are 7 principles that have been established. And again, they apply to all of the ISOs. And they're certainly, I believe, in the order of maybe 30 ISOs, each one specializing in its own area. So the first principle is customer focus. Obviously, the whole purpose is the most important is to make your customer happy. So you have to focus on your customer. Leadership. The organization has to have a leadership structure that would obviously enforce quality. And if certainly management doesn't do that, then everything will fall apart. And that has to flow down to all of the people of the organization. So everybody has to be engaged and be aware of how they contribute to improving quality. Then you have to establish processes. And processes are really activities that are integrated with each other. And it's really, the process approach is really very consistent with the lean approach, where you're trying to make the processes integrate in such a way that the whole, the way the organization runs becomes more efficient. And then continuous improvement. That's a very important part of the ISO principle. You are never perfect. There's always room for improvement, but you have to be able to judiciously decide what areas you need to improve on. And that comes with the next principle, evidence-based decision making. So in order to make improvements, you have to use the information that is based on data that you've collected, and not just do guesswork and, you know, pulling it out of the air, but you have to rely on actual collected data. This is a very important part of making the right decisions as to which improvements you should be looking at. And finally, relationship management. So what does that mean? Well, management really has to be involved much more than just running the organization, even though that's an important aspect. But management has to be concerned with the customers, the investors, the regulatory authorities, supply chain. Supply chain is a big issue now. So management has to encompass all of those aspects of the organization, which are really, you know, would be driving to the success of the organization. But you have to look at all aspects of it. All right, so what really ISO is called, it's a quality management system, QMS. And if your organization is looking for or is trying to achieve ISO certification, then you must have a QMS in place. However, if you're not, and not all companies either need to be ISO certified or want to be ISO certified, but it is very highly recommended that they adopt a quality management system. And certainly ISO is a very good guideline to adopt, because that has been proven for many, many years that it does work. So if you don't feel, the organization doesn't feel that you need to expend the extra funds to get certified and maintain certification, then you can be ISO compliant and certainly follow the ISO standard. So that's one way to deal with it. But in any way, it's important to have a quality management system. So what is really a quality management system? Well, it consists of policies. So policies are really, you know, what are you trying to achieve with quality? Certainly meet the customer requirements, at least meet the customer expectations, or hopefully exceed them. and have a continuous improvement process. Because as I said, there's always room for improvement. Then the next level is your procedures. And procedures are your internal documents or customer-driven documents, certainly the requirements for their products or service. It also applies to if you're a service organization. And also procedures which deals with every level of your activities. For example, how do you control non-conforming products? What is your corrective and preventive action? And then you obviously have a number of documents, standard operating procedures, your internal regulations, and so on. So the control of your documents and records. Now, records are the data that you collect as part of your business. And we'll talk a little more about what the records are. And certainly an important part of ISO is to perform internal audits. That is required to have at least a yearly internal audit to cover all of your processes, internal processes. And internal audits can be either done by an external organization, or you can do an internal audit by your own people. But the only requirement is that a person cannot audit his or her own work. And then finally, you have responsibilities. In other words, what are the roles and authorities? What are your required resources? And then also the competence or the training that you need to provide to your personnel. Communication is very important because everybody in your organization has to be aware of what's going on. And finally, everybody has to know what your quality policy is. Okay, without that, obviously, you're gonna raise you have some holes, and there'll be some issues that you have to deal with. Now, I will talk about this continuous improvement diagram, I guess, on the next slide. And I think this diagram is probably the best way to describe what a quality management system is. And this was developed by quality guru Deming, and he calls it the plan, do, check, act cycle. And it's a continuous, as you can see, continuous loop that you really never get out of it, because that's how you achieve continuous improvement. Now, just to clarify some of the points on this diagram is, as you can see on the right side, you have the ISO clauses. And by the way, that applies to any ISO, okay? They have clauses, the requirements are really in clauses 4 to 10. The first 3 clauses are an introduction, definition, which don't contain any requirements, but 4 through 10 is really the meat of the ISO standard. And on the diagram, you see some numbers in parentheses, and they actually refer to the particular ISO clause. So you can see now all of the ISO requirements are mapped into this diagram. And as you can see, everything, you have your inputs coming in from the left. So obviously you have customer requirements, you have your organization and its context. So and then also, what are the needs of your interested parties, your investors, your customers, whoever has interest in your organization. So all of that has to be fed into the planning stage, where you do your plan, and then you move on to your support and operation phase, which is really what you're trying to develop, whether if it's a manufacturing organization. This is where your either your design or development work and manufacturing occurs, and you can see into it feeds the supply chain, and obviously that has tremendous impact to your performance, dealing, if you're having problems dealing with your suppliers. And then once your product or service is complete, you do a performance evaluation. This is clause 9. So you evaluate your product, you test it, you look for non-conformances, and you hope to find as many non-conformances before you ship to the customer. However, nobody's perfect, and there will be some defects that the customer picks up, and that will be feeding it back to your organization. But all of that has to be evaluated, and analysis has to be made to determine, well, why do I have a non-conformance? How can I make an improvement? And this is where the performance evaluation function is done. And then you decide, yes, well, based on that data that I've collected, I will make an improvement. And you decide which improvements you're going to be making, and then it feeds back to the planning stage. So you're basically staying in that loop, and you can have multiple loops, simultaneous loops that you should be looking at any time. So that's kind of an overview of how the quality management system works. So what are the major elements of a quality management system? Well, I kind of broke it down into 3 areas. First of all is your processes and their interactions. As I mentioned before, processes are your activities, and you need to, again, for your particular business, define what your processes are. And it's strictly, nobody's going to tell you how to pick your processes. It's your decision to make your organization function more efficiently. But as part of those activities, you need to set up a schedule, assign personnel, and also you have to monitor the progress of those activities. And obviously, if you're not meeting the deadlines, then that has to be reported to management, because then management should make decisions as to correct these problems. And also a very important part, and that's a requirement for all of the ISOs now, is identify and manage risks. That's really done in the planning stage, but it's very important to stay on top of them and identify each risk. How's it going to be resolved? It could be mitigated by taking certain action, or it could provide very minimal impact to your business, and you could ignore it. But each risk has to be addressed separately. Then the next part of your QMS is your document and their control. Okay, so document, obviously, like I mentioned before, it covers everything, both internal and external documents. And now comes the storage method, because really ISO doesn't dictate you how you store it, how you control them, because you can still have all of your documents stored as hard copies, and that's allowed, but obviously it has a lot of disadvantages versus an electronic storage. Now, when you deal with an electronic storage, there's also different media, whether it's a central database where everything is stored centrally, whether it's on-site or off-site, but it's stored on a central database, versus a distributed computer, so that you have different data stored on different computers. So that's really your decision how you want to manage this. But the important thing is configuration control of these documents, so that no matter how they're stored, you need to control their changes and the traceability of the changes. If you're making a change to a particular document, then you have to provide the rationale for changing the document, and also maintain the records for all the changes and why they were made. Okay, now once a document is or procedure is updated, then it's very important that the latest version be available to all of the personnel that need it. Because the worst thing is that you change a document to a next revision, and the people that need to use it are not informed and are still using an older version. That could really spell a big disaster. Okay, finally is the data that you collect, or called records. And as I mentioned before, data is extremely important for continuous improvement. There data is used to perform various types of root cause analysis. Certainly QDMS supports all those tools that are available for root cause analysis. And then, of course, you have an internal audit process that is needed to make sure that you are following your own process. And the results of the audit, if it finds discrepancies, then it's another mechanism of making internal improvements. So let me just quickly go over, the different ISOs that I mentioned previously. Certainly, if you look at ISO 9001 is really the parent, ISO. And so it really contains, I don't want to pick a number, but let's say 80% of all what the other ISOs have. So it's the basic standard with obviously with additions that depends on the particular market that you're in. So let's say for 13485, which is the quality management for medical devices, there are additional requirements specific to this field. Certainly it deals with the work environment, contamination, the cleanliness, sterility, and then you obviously, if you're a medical device manufacturer, you have to deal with the regulatory authorities, and then obviously any defects that are uncovered, obviously it has to be controlled and managed. And also there are very specific additional documentation required for medical devices. We go on now to the aerospace standard, AS9100. Again, very similar. It has some additional requirements, and this obviously safety here is paramount because you're dealing with aircraft. So you obviously don't want any failures to occur that could generate a failure or God forbid a crash of the aircraft. So there are additional requirements. Certainly risk management is extremely important. So here you have to have a risk management process under AS9100, not just addressing risk, but to have a whole management process. Product safety, obviously, very important. Any special requirements? Critical items, configuration management is extremely important to make sure you have the traceability, of course, on-time delivery. Counterfeit parts, okay? And there's a lot of them that surface, even though they look like they're the real part, especially this is in the area of electronic circuits. So you have to deal with this issue and make sure that counterfeit parts don't get into your equipment. And also there's expanded requirements for production and external providers. Now, obviously, you rely on external providers, so they have to meet the same standards that you are meeting. Otherwise, your quality system really falls apart if your providers don't meet the same standard. And now if we go to the food safety, again, it's the same thing. It's now it all deals with the food chain. And this is really covers the entire food chain from the, the feed and animal food producers to the ingredient producers and so on. So Oh yeah, as well as catering, logistics, storage, and packaging suppliers. So again, same structure, but additional requirements to deal with those specific areas. So bottom line is, well, why is really ISO good for your organization? Well, as I mentioned before, you need a quality system, and ISO is a standard that is recognized worldwide. So no matter where you are in Asia, Africa, wherever, they still follow the same standard. And it does improve your customer satisfaction because your customer now knows that you have an internal quality management system. So it enhances your credibility and image. You get a plaque where you can now use in your website that you're ISO certified. And because of the supply chain issue that I mentioned before, some customers will require you to be ISO certified because they want to make sure that they get a quality product. And obviously, you have to then maintain a continual improvement culture, which is very important. And then it increases your internal efficiency. As I mentioned before, decision making now, it has a process, okay? Now you look at data and you make decision based on certain information and not just, wild guesses. Process integration is improved. And also your workforce is engaged and they now feel that they're part of this process. So overall, it's, with time, it will increase your revenues and profitability, even though ISO doesn't get involved in the financial aspect of your organization. Bottom line is your profitability should improve. So finally, as a conclusion, I would like to just say a few words about dealing with and managing QMS. And again, since we went through in the last 2 years through the pandemic, it became even a more challenging proposition to deal with QMS. And why? Because, well, a lot of workforce now is remote. Now, how do you, when you're are remotely located, how do you access all of the data, QMS data? So you still need to do your job, even though you're off-site, you still need a virtual control of the QMS documents and records. And then about, I think, 2 presentations back, Dr. Onus made a very interesting discussion on virtual audits, okay? So right now with the working off-site and the ability to do audits virtually, now this is very important that the QDMS tool is now really one way of providing you capability of accessing all of the data if you're in a remote location. Because it's really technology, part of the technology that's needed to do virtual audits and virtual control of your QMS. And certainly QDMS does provide that capability by allowing with privileges, remote access to certain of your workers or even the auditor. All of that information now is available as if the auditor or the worker is located on site. So it's very important aspect of this technology that QDMS is providing. So we hope that the pandemic will be behind us soon, but I think the remote workforce will continue. So I think the technology to support that has to be able to be available. And as I mentioned before, the QDMS software tool is certainly fully supports all aspects of the ISO digital implementation. No matter which ISO you're either compliant or certified to, it will fully support the implementation. Like I said, from my own experience, I really highly recommend the tool because it will support the QMS management, both for the on-site and the remote employees, and even, like I said, auditors. So that basically completes my presentation, and I guess I'll turn this over to Kevin. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you,
your
Alex.
attention.
Thank you, Alex. Much appreciated. Let me take over the screen. We also have some questions, but I think we can address the questions after Sam's session, if that's all right. Sam can perform a brief demo of QDMS with regards to corrective action as well as risk management modules of QDMS, just to share with attendees as to how they can manage and comply ISO standards digitally on QDMS. Sam, you ready to show a couple of modules? Yeah, looks like his microphone is muted. All right. Looks good, Sam.
Great. Thank you for joining. And in the following, I will demonstrate QDMS and let you know how you can use and enjoy the benefits of our system while you're complying with the ISO standards. As I've mentioned in the previous session, QDMS is a web-based and also permission-based system. So you can connect to your own QDMS anytime and anywhere by connecting via your web browser, like Google Chrome, Firefox, Microsoft Edge, or Safari, you name it. Furthermore, you will see what you're supposed to do based on the permissions that are granted to your account. Different users have different permissions based on their role, position, profession, department, and group. I'm now logging in as their admin so that I have the full control of the system. And right after we log in, we can find all the pending tasks and also the assignments on our homepage. In terms of the notification, you will also receive an email in your email inbox so that by using our system, we make sure you will not miss an important task by using QDMS. So let us get into the corrective action module, as known as the CAPA module, also the risk assessment management module on a high level in coming minutes. Before I get into the corrective action module, I want to let you know this is the main menu of QDMS, and it provides over 30 modules and thanks to the modular structure of the system, you can pick and choose the modules that you want to have and deploy on your cloud or on-premise server based upon the challenges that you are currently encountering. And in the corrective action module, we can find all the corrective action records that we have recorded or that we have saved in this module. So based on different non-conformities that we found in our organization, we can record it in our system, and all your records will be shown in different status based on the progress that you are handling this particular record. For example, like those are in review, and also those will be marked as, for example, follow-up, plan, result, so forth and so on. And let me open one of the records that we have in this corrective action module. And we may find this report-like page in this corrective action module. So when we are managing the records in QDMS, we can enter the non-conformity information in the very beginning while we are opening this new record in the corrective action module. Also, we can categorize it, and as for all your records, it will be recorded or saved with the username. First of all, who opened this and who recorded in the system, with the date and also the time that we're opening this new record. Furthermore, we can assign a solution team to take care of this non-conformity, meaning who will be responsible to perform the first progress report, meaning the investigation, and also define the root cause. So right here, you can see like the system take you step by step after we open a new record, and then we can assign a solution team, and this team can perform the investigation and define the root cause. After that, we can also schedule any corrective or preventive action in order to cope with the root cause, meaning we are trying to solve the problem that we have in our organization. And we can assign this corrective action to the action performer. And this action performer has also come back to the system and update what he or she has done in order to regarding this particular action that we assigned it to this user, and also which root cause that we are coping with. If there's no other follow-up action is required, then we can close this record accordingly. So this is a report-like page that shows all the information that we have recorded in one particular record. And think about like we have the ISO auditor coming to our office, and we are the quality manager. Okay, and the auditor asks us like how you manage your non-conformity and corrective action in your company. Do you have to spend like 2 hours to search all the records that you have in your cabinet or in your drawer or wherever you store them? No, you don't. And actually, you just come to QDMS, connect to the system, and open this page and show this to the auditor. Like this is how we manage the non-conformity information, and this is how we manage the corrective action record. You can show the auditors step by step. Okay, and all this information are recorded digitally. So by using our system, you can save your time and also the cost as for managing your corrective action while you are complying with ISO standard. As you know, and also as Alex mentioned, managing the corrective action in order to have the continuous improvement is essential while you're complying with ISO standards. So this is how we can have QDMS in place and enjoy the benefits from QDMS. When we are saying like adding a new record, what you will see is the data entry part where we can enter the non-conformity and also the categorizing them. Also, we can assign this to the solution team and attach any document if there's any, saying like in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, PDF, video, and even audio. On the top, you can also find different tabs. Those are not available at this moment because we are creating a new record. As I've mentioned, the system will take you step by step in order to update your corrective action record created in QDMS so that you can follow the process, like having your first progress report, like having your investigation, and then the system will actually define the root cause and schedule the corrective action accordingly and eventually. In every single module of QDMS, there is a reporting tool that allows you to generate different ready-made reports and also your graphical reports. Before having your report, you're more than welcome to put together certain criteria or conditions. For example, like I want to see which customer that we have filed the customer report for within this certain time frame. And then we can draw our graph, meaning prepare our data, and all your data will be shown in a bar chart or table. You are more than welcome to export your report into Excel, PDF, or image for sharing with any responsible parties or for your own documentation. As we are complying with ISO standards, and now risk assessment is a must. So that we, by using QDMS, we can also manage, or it helps you manage your risk assessment digitally. And we can create different risk assessment plan. And when we are talking about the plan in QDMS, that is the goal that we want to achieve. For example, like the health and safety risk assessment. This is the goal. Like we want to see how likely and how critical that we are going to have this risk in our organization. But the situation or the result may vary from the department. So that we have our plan and we can create our assessment item. We can create our item for different departments as the objectives that help us achieve our goal, meaning the health and safety assessment plan. So right here in this demo environment and also the examples that I put together, we have the risk assessment item for our shipping department, production department, and also packaging department, for example. And all these records will be shown in different color, which are green, yellow, and red. When it is in green color, meaning it's this risk is not likely to be happen in this department, and also the result is or the impact is not critical to our organization. When it is in yellow color, then our attention is required. When it is in red color, that means this risk is highly likely to happen in our company, and also the impact is critical against our company as well. And as for risk assessment, it is not a one-time job. We have to perform it or perform the assessment periodically, so that we can also find a trend, like if it is getting better or nothing changed, remain constant, or it's getting worse. Those will be shown with different arrows that we can find in the trend column. When we are having our risk assessment by using QDMS, you're more than welcome to update the date that you perform the risk assessment, the source, and also the result, like what could be go wrong, like injury on fire or product loss, for example. In addition, we can select the impact and also the likelihood from a scale. It can be a scale of 5, 7, or 11. QDMS is flexible and capable enough to update it based upon the actual operation of your company in terms of risk assessment. So if you're using a scale of 7 in terms of managing the impact and also the likelihood, we are more than happy to configure the system for you during the implementation process. And the system will calculate the risk score automatically, and also give you the risk index automatically. So you don't have to do it in your head for any calculation, and instead QDMS will take care of it for you. Furthermore, if there's any precaution action that is required after we have our assessment, so we can also create different precaution action, like if there's any other document that we have uploaded to the system, or that we have uploaded to the system in order to cope with this risk or minimizing the chance or the possibility that we are having this risk happen in our company, or any corrective action that we need. So we are more than welcome to update it right here as the precaution action right under our risk assessment item. As I've mentioned, the risk assessment, there is a reporting tool that is available for every single module in QDMS. So we can also find one under this risk assessment management module. And we can have this report or graphical report to be generated in our system for keep tracking and monitor the performance of our company, and also all the KPIs that we have in our organization. It comes to the end of my demonstration on a high level for corrective action and risk assessment module of QDMS. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam, for the demonstration. Let me take over the screen and we can continue our session. All right, so we have some questions. If we can address, that'd be great. For example, as for the ISO compliance, Alex, so where should we start from for ISO certification preparations?
Well, in order to achieve certification, the organization has to demonstrate that you are using and following the ISO guidelines. So it's more than just coming up with a number of documents, procedures, and so on, but you actually have to now implement ISO, meaning that you have to now do obviously evaluation of your product or service, show how your continuous improvement process works. How do you monitor your suppliers? So it's really all inclusive. And like I said, it's not just to create documents, which is the first thing you should do, but then you should now start implementing whatever processes you've identified. And it takes time, and it all depends where you started from. If you really had absolutely no quality management requirements, or you weren't really ready, then it would take some time. However, if you were, let's say, ISO compliant, so what it really means is that now you just have to go through the audits and become certified, then obviously that's a lot quicker. So it depends. It depends on also how much time the organization will want to put into it. But I would say, it could take anywhere from a year if you're not really compliant with ISO, to only a few months if you are compliant, and it just means to go to the next step and get certified.
Thank you, Alex. Let me see if we have any other questions. So, so there are different ISO types. Which one should we have as a manufacturer?
Well, it all depends obviously on the product that you're manufacturing. For your standard product, ISO 9001 is a generic standard, which really covers a lot of the manufacturing the various products that you're trying to achieve. A lot of it really depends on the requirements from your customer. Because if you're manufacturing medical devices, then you're now the supplier, and you're supplying your equipment to a customer who may require you to be certified to the medical ISO standard, the 13485. But it all depends on your customer. And again, with most of the products, ISO 9001 would cover that. And then typically, a number of organizations have two certifications. They start out with ISO 9001, and then they do a Delta certification to the new standard, whether it's AS9100, if they're doing aerospace or military work. Same thing to the food safety industry, because the important part is that they don't contradict each other. In other words, if you have ISO, you're covering about 80% of the specialized ISOs that are required. So So one way to achieve that is to go with for 9001, and then, if necessary, get another certification for whatever area of specialty that you're involved in.
Thank you, Alex. Let's see our Q&A section if we have any other questions, also from chat. There is a question about QDMS. We have our own risk management analysis. Can we customize risk module part to digitize it? Yes, so we see sometimes different type of practices. Sometimes companies, they have their own way of managing corrective actions or risk management, risk assessments, for example. So if we can, once we understand how you like to be managed, we can configure the system for you, which is actually very, very practical in that sense, so that we can help you manage your ISO compliance or just risk management accordingly. Also, we are recording these sessions and we're gonna make them available on YouTube, just so you know. So you can always come back and you can watch these discussions and demo sessions online on our YouTube channel. Bimser International YouTube channel is our official website. We have hundreds of videos that are available, and today's SYNERGIZE 2022 sessions will be also available on our YouTube channel early next week, so you can watch it from there. All right, looks good. So Alex, before we end, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our attendees?
Oh yes, yeah. As a takeaway, I think the important message that I want to convey is, the importance of QDMS and actually how it simplifies your quality management operation. Because from my own experience, when I was working in the aerospace business, every year when you have a surveillance audit, about 2 weeks before the audit, it's panic time. Everybody's just like worried about getting all the data for the auditor. If your information is not centralized, it's scattered, even though it may be digital, it may be scattered on different machines, computers. So it's a big effort to prepare and make sure that when the auditor comes, everything is readily available. Certainly you can pass your audit without QDMS, but if you've been using QDMS all along, then really there's almost no preparation time, because all the information that the auditor requires will be already available on the server, whether it's a local server or remote server, it doesn't really matter. But the data is there, and whatever he's asking for, you can say, well, here it is, and you don't have to run and find the information and get into a panic mode. And again, I think from my own experience, I can say that QDMS would be extremely helpful in not only dealing with audits, but really to manage your own internal quality management system.
Alex, thank you very much for your insights. Much appreciated. Thank you. And it's always a pleasure having you as our panelist, as our expert in ISO and compliance. Thank you very much.